Hello and welcome to the Brethren. My name is Renee and this is Fictional Crafts, where I am journaling, documenting, chatting to my friends, where I am journaling my independent writing journey / publishing, my reading, and maybe the occasional stitch and bitch, I reckon, possibly. Yeah, I'm still working on the intro. Still working on it. So I thought it was about high time I did a video on my writing, and quite specifically on Botany, which is the second book that I'm planning to release. I had hoped to release it last year in 2025, but no, let's not discuss the dumpster fire that was 2025. Please, let's just leave that one alone. We had a rough year. But it is 2026. Yes, that is the Hunger Games whistle. Let me I should have done that before I started recording. So yes, Botany. So I'll start with just like a little quick rundown of how I do my drafts. And I muted that. Shush. So yeah, so I'll do a quick rundown on how I actually do my drafts. Well, it's still a progress. It's still a process that's being developed, but at the moment, I usually go through about what I call 5 drafts. So the 5 drafts aren't 5 individual drafts. They might be multiple versions of the same draft, multiple dead ends, multiple get 10,000 words into editing, just go, no, this is going in the wrong track back to the original draft, start again, sort of situation. But essentially there's five stages or 5 drafts. My first draft stage is just my idea stage. So I might write a scene here, I might write a scene there, I might write a note about how I want a character to do something or a character to discover something. So for instance, in Botany, Eric discovers that his captain was originally going to kill him, and he has to deal with that discussion. And then, so once I sort of got like an idea of what the problem is and sort of where the characters might generally react or try to do to change the problem or to fix it, and that's sort of like, yeah, like, and I do all that in Scrivener, so it's like, you know, just like note cards and little bits and here and there and that sort of thing. Then once I've got a good idea of sort of where things are going to go, I start writing, and that becomes draft 2. And then draft 2 could be many versions of draft 2. I might get 15,000 words in and realize that there is just no way a character would react like that. So I have to like rip back 5,000 words and start again completely, things like that. And that's when I'm starting to discover the plot. So for me, I start with a situation. I start with, oh yeah, I know this character's going to do this, and I know this character's going to do that. And I start writing, and then by the end of by the time I've gotten to the end of draft 2, I know what the sequence of events are going to be to a degree. They can always change. And I know sort of the general sort of layout, you know, this is happening over here, that's happening over there, this is happening down here, this is what's on the page. Critical, there's a lot of stuff happening around, but it's not on the page. And then draft 3 is making it work. So, you know, I might be missing a crucial information or crucial sort of reasoning behind someone's motivations. And that's what draft 3 becomes. Draft 3 becomes me making sure everything makes sense. to a point. All this changes eventually. Once I finish draft three is sort of like making it as good as I can get it before it gets outside views. And it's at that point I send it to workshopping. So I've got a group of friends that we all met whilst doing a professional writing and editing course in the early 2000s, 2002, 2003, I think it was, when I was there. And we've met off and on since then. So that's like over 20 years now. And people come, people go, people's life change, that sort of thing. But essentially, we've always had some form of writing group. And they know my characters very well. They've seen them change a lot over the years, which is great, because then they actually sometimes ask questions about, well, what about this? And it's like, oh, well, that actually doesn't happen anymore. I decided to get rid of that aspect of that character. So it's actually really good because it helps me justify like changes I've made, as well as them looking at the work and seeing that it makes sense based on the characters as they know them. Or the plot makes sense, or, I've got military, a naval sort of space navy in my stories, and, they might go, oh, that doesn't make sense, like, for like a navy point of view, as in like, logical point of view of how they might operate, things like that. So after they've done that, my draft 4 is effectively me implementing their feedback, which could be me reading their feedback and going, well, no, I don't want that suggestion, but I obviously need to justify why the character's doing what they're doing. Otherwise they wouldn't have suggested. So, for instance, I might get, oh, why didn't the captain just open up and say this to Eric? And because obviously they know what the back motivations are, but the character doesn't. And my answer might be, well, she can't tell him because she's telling him she's putting him in danger. Because if he knows, then he might blurt it out, or he might be taken hostage and have it tortured out of him, that sort of thing. So I've got to make it a little bit more obvious in the captain's point of view that this is why she's not telling Eric something. I'm hoping all this makes sense. So that's sort of draft 4. And then once I've sort of like put in all their stuff, it doesn't have to be pretty. It's just literally, oh, yep, got to add this in, got to add that in, maybe add a scene in here, that sort of thing. Then draft 5 is my final draft. Draft 5 is taking all that feedback, taking all that information, and smoothing it out. So cleaning it up, maybe moving things around a little bit, making maybe characters learn something a little earlier than intended or a little later than I originally had it, that sort of thing. Making it as smooth as possible, as neat as possible, as much description as possible, because white room syndrome is a thing. And then that is the draft I give to my editor. So we normally do 2 rounds of edits, with an option for a third if needed. So the first lot is a developmental edit. And so she will go through all my work. She'll go through everything. She'll point out things that I've completely missed, things that I thought were in there but I forgot to add in, things that have, like, I might have a plot point that just like disappears because I decided to get rid of it and then left a couple of lines in an earlier chapter that I completely forgot to take out, that sort of stuff, proper developmental editing. I get that back, I go through all the development edits, I answer the questions, I clean up the draft as much as I can, give it back to her, then she does a line edit, I guess, yeah, copy edit, line edit, that sort of mix, where she's pointing out things that don't make, but things that I've still missed, like, a couple of times, and a good editor will always do this, no matter what edit they're doing. If they find something that is really, really wrong, they will point out. And then also too, she'll start obviously pointing out, this sentence doesn't make sense. You need to clean this sentence up, or this is what I think you're trying to say. Is this correct? That sort of thing. And that is where Botany is right now. So the steps after that are obviously I'm going to give it back to her and do like a copy edit afterwards. And she always does do just like a final read through just to make sure, like, if I've missed anything that she's noted, because by the time I've done this, I've gone through Botany like 10 times already. So sometimes I just miss things because I just assume they're there because I've read it so many times. I'm just like, oh yeah, that's there. So she might point out that something's missing and I'll go, oh shit, yeah, okay, and add in like an extra line, and then she'll copy edit that line for me or something like that. But at the end of this current edit that I'm currently doing, the goal is to just do a copy edit. Just clean up words, look for crutch words, that sort of thing. And I try to do all that before I give it back to her anyway. I try to make her job as easy as possible so she can get to the stuff that I really am blind to, and we can clean it up. And as I said, Botany is at that point now. So Botany, she gave Botany back to me September last year. No, earlier. June, July last year. And personal wise, we've had a horrible 6 months. So more important than me getting a book out. So it hit about October and I went, you know what? I'm nowhere near editing this. I kept putting it off. I didn't want to look at it. I just didn't have the brain power for what I knew I needed to do. There was also a part in Botany at the moment. There's always been this cartoon villain moment that is a little bit problematic because I don't like it. I don't like the cartoon villain moment, but I couldn't put my head on what was wrong with it other than being a cartoon villain moment. And my break from Botany, the rest I've had away from editing it, has sort of made it a bit clear to me that the original inspiration for Botany was Escape from New York. Okay, so Escape from New York, the John Carpenter's, what's the name of the actor? Kirk Russell? Snake Plissken. That was the original inspiration for Botany. So the Botany storyline is effectively Captain Hawk and Eric land on Botany, which is a penal colony, and they're searching for one of the other pirate captains who got taken and interred, who got taken and interred. And it's the storyline of it effectively started out as an homage, as a thing of Escape from New York, where, you know, they go into the labyrinth, find what they're looking for, and get back out of the labyrinth. It's effectively a labyrinth story. And there's this point, like, in Escape from New York, they're trying to escape. So the bad guy is trying to get out of New York because obviously he's interred there. He doesn't want to be there. He's trying to get out. And as part of that, he's saying to everyone, we can be free. It's time for us to get out. And it's a good motivation for Escape from New York, but it didn't quite translate into Botany. And I think that's where the problem's been. So my bad guy's motivation has been to escape. But in writing and rewriting Botany, and editing Botany, his character has changed and he's no longer just a criminal trying to escape. So the motivation of him trying to get a ship, which is obviously he wants the captain and Eric because he thinks he can convince them to so he can use their ship to escape, doesn't make sense anymore. And now I think I know what I've got an idea. Like, so this guy's gone from just being a career criminal to being a fleet internal security plant on the planet that's gone bad. So he's now like double dealing. He's a double agent. He's using his position to make fuel crystals, which is what the penal colony makes, and is selling them underhandedly to people, to criminals and to the elites, who are the big bad of fleet. So there's the UTC, United Trade Confederate, and they control from Earth. They control Terra. They are like the human control, the human government. And the elites are a splinter from humans. I call them Terrans, so I'll try to just refer to them as Terrans because it's easier for my brain. And they are in a Cold War situation with the UTC, and they have been for generations, because they have a very different philosophy on life, and they just are incompatible as two different, consider them just two different countries that just don't like each other, or two different religions that just don't like each other. Take your pick. But there's always double dealing between them. There's always people aiming to get a buck. And this guy has developed into one of those, where he is using his position of power and his location to make money for himself. And so this motivation of him trying to get a ship to get off planet doesn't make sense anymore. And I think that's what was stopping me from editing the entire book, because I knew it was a problem and I couldn't get my head around it. And that's what happens with me. If I know that there's a problem, my brain needs to I need to walk away, and I need to think about it, and I need to just figure out what the problem is so I can fix that. And now I actually have a plan. So I'm going to peel back this guy's network a little bit, and I'm going to make it that he wants to use Captain Desmond, which is Desmond Rowe, who's been captured and being taken to Botany. He's using him to get to the rest of the Brethren, so he can use the Brethren as mules. That's what I want to change. So it's 2 or 3 lines in this book. That is literally all it is. But now that I have his motivation in line with his personality, that his character that was created, I am ready to start editing Botany again. So I'm going to have to come in a bit later, and you will not see my editor's name, just for her privacy's sake. But this is the document that I am currently working on. It is named Edit 2, Botany Second Edit RH2, which means that it's my second edit that I'm trying to do to give back to my editor. And you may notice, so I've got the blurb, which I have written and rewritten and written. It is our blurb. My editor includes the blurbs in the editing process. So I actually have this set up as almost an ebook. So I have the blurb, I have the title page, which will eventually be an image, and half title page, which is also going to be an image. I also need to fix that because this is not going to be done until 2026 now, because that is 2026. And I've got my imprint page. I've got the contents, which is driving me a bit nuts because I've got to figure out how to get rid of the second, the numbers for the page numbers for the second title. Because if you can see here, I actually have this book set up with a countdown, which needs work because the countdown is definitely out. And countdowns are really fucking hard, okay? Don't do a countdown unless you really have to. I've got a glossary. And we have actually decided to do a common terms dictionary. So it's going to be at the front of the book at the moment. At the moment, I am just writing the words down as they come across in prose, and then I'm going to go through and write proper descriptions and meanings behind everything. But if it gets too big, it'll probably go at the back of the book. I've got a map here. That's a quick, I actually need to edit it. I've left something off. So, oops, I'll fix it up. But yeah, I couldn't do a proper map. Not as like, you know, a pretty map of a city. I just don't have the skills. So I got some free elements from, what's it called? What's it called? One of those free use image sites, and I manipulated it to turn it into a map. I've got a list of all the brethren who are the pirates, the space pirates, and then we have the start of the book. So the book itself, why do I not have a word count here? Oh yeah, and these are my notes. Like, for instance, one of the characters in this is Aziza. They're a hermaphrodite. And they originally started as a woman before I decided to make them a hermaphrodite for culture reasons. And I have so many mispronouns in this book because of it. It is driving me insane. But that's okay. I'll figure it out. And but I'm just trying to find out how many words we currently have. Review. I think it's in review. Where's my word count? There it is. Okay. So at the moment, we are 60,000 words, 115. So 60,115 words. It's going to be more than that by the time I'm finished. I know that because I'm an underwriter, chronic underwriter. So yeah, let me just. Okay, so botany is at the moment at about 60,115 words. That includes the blurb, the imprint pages, all that sort of information, that sort of stuff. So I reckon the book itself would be closer to just under 60,000 words at the moment. I reckon it's not going to grow much. It'll probably, if anything, maybe grow to about an extra 2,000 or 3,000 words maybe when I get around to finishing describing things or making sentences make a bit more sense. Things like that. But it's not a huge book. It is going to take me a while to get through it because I'm about to go back to work. I go back to work on Monday. It is now Saturday. I'm going to be working 5 days a week. And I have obviously my children before and after work. So my time to work on the edits is going to be very restricted. My son is also an extremely good reader. So I can't really work whilst he's up because if he comes in and starts reading my adult novel, it's not appropriate. So I have to work around that as well. So I'll probably end up editing maybe 1 or 2 hours after dinner, after showers, after bedtime routine, that sort of thing, before I go to bed. And that will probably not get much done, at least for a couple of weeks, until I am used to being back at work. So we also have a few other personal concerns coming up at the moment. I'd say concerns. They're just, it's life. If you've been on the channel for a while, you know my son's been diagnosed autistic, and we've been waiting for my daughter to get an appointment, and she has her appointment next week. So it's her initial appointment. There's going to be at least 2 appointments for her. So there's obviously the initial appointment. We go through all the information and behaviors and things like that, and then they have the proper big assessment. So yes, I'm going back to work with a new boss because the company was sold over Christmas. And my first week back, I have to leave early at least one day so I can take my daughter to an assessment. My boss is going to love me. Nah, he's really understanding. He gets it. He knows it's coming too. So we weren't expecting it to happen so quickly. We were actually expecting it to happen in May, but we managed to get a spot, and I am not losing that spot. So yeah. So I'm going to bring you along. Maybe I might just at the moment, as I said, the big thing for me at the moment is I've got to change that one little thing. And then I think it's going to make this book flow. I don't think there's any other niggly plot problems, character motivations, or anything like that. If anything, after I fix that, it is literally making line by line, this book is showing the image to the reader that I am intending. And that takes out a lot of thoughts because I don't have to worry about ongoing plot and ongoing character issues and ongoing character motivations. But it's also difficult for me because I am dyslexic and I read more into what I've written than is actually there. So that is a challenge that I know I have, and my editor knows I have. So she's really great. She looks for that stuff for me, and there's a lot of notes from her saying, I think you mean this, but you haven't actually said it. And I'm like, oh yes, I need to add that in, don't I? So yes, that is where we are at with Botany. I am hoping to maybe have this edit mostly done by Easter, say 3 months, 4 months. When's Easter? April? Start of April this year. I think that's close enough to make me do it, but far enough away not to make me anxious that I'm going to miss it. I think that's a good thing. And then I've also got to get in contact with my editor and let her know that that is the plan. And we'll go from there. So yeah, so thank you for joining me. I know this is a bit rambly. I keep looking at my screen because I'm trying to monitor this microphone to make sure it's working. I'm getting there. I think I've managed to fix the delay that was in the first video. So let me know if there's still a big delay. I think there's a little delay, but I don't think it's too bad anymore. And from that point, yeah, so is that everything about Botany? I think that is everything about Botany. Yeah, I'm just now got to work through line by line and get this shit sorted. And then afterwards, actually, after I've done all that, I've got to go back and I've got to double check the timeline and make sure the countdown makes sense. Because if there's one thing you really shouldn't put in a book, it's a very concrete timeline. I wanted to challenge myself, okay? I also wanted to mimic the countdown for Snake Plissken's when he's sick, and they've given him a timer saying you've got I think it's 12 hours until this flu is irreversible and it will kill you, sort of thing. And I wanted to have an element of that in the book. But if I can't get the timeline to work, I might just have to make it more broad and just say sort of approximately 9 hours to 0. But I don't want to. I want it to have this really concrete timeline. So I don't know. I mean, once it's finished, I guess you guys will be the judge of whether or not I managed it. But in the meantime, I am now going to see if I have to edit any of this out. I probably will. And get some dino nuggies and ABC nuggies cooking for the kids. And then I'm going to maybe do some knitting. But in the meantime, I would say like, comment, and subscribe. But we are all adults here. Do whatever the fuck you want. And I shall see you in the next video. Bye.